What if we're looking at this all wrong? What if, having entered a new world, and it is my contention we are in a new world, what if in this new world there has to be what Rabbi Shefetz and others have called a paradigm shift? There has to be a whole new way for us to look at Judaism and to look at God. Now, why is this true? David Weiss Halivni, in this lovely little book, talks about Jewish theology after the Shoah. You know that we have relinquished the word Holocaust now because everybody has a Holocaust of their very own, and we're starting to use the word Shoah, which is a Hebrew word. And he discusses the fact that from his perspective as an Orthodox Jew, God was not present in the Holocaust. God was absent. And he claims that Jewish history up until the Holocaust is a study of God growing ever more distant to the Jewish people. That in the Bible you have God's immanence, and gradually you have God cutting itself off from the Jewish people, or the Jewish people cutting itself off from God until the Holocaust. Where you don't want to go with that argument is to blame the Jews who died. There are Orthodox rabbis and Orthodox theologians who have written that the Holocaust was the fault of those who died and those who suffered in the Holocaust. That it was their sins against God that caused God to lose faith in them and therefore to allow the Holocaust to occur. I would state, and many other theologians, I'm not a theologian, I would state, and theologians, different theologians would state, that that's blasphemy. To blame the victims for the Holocaust makes the Holocaust even worse than it was in and of itself. And that we just can't go to that place. But Halivni does at least agree from an Orthodox perspective, and that's what you have to remember. He agrees from an Orthodox perspective that God was not present. There was another rabbi who wrote a group of sermons while in the death camps. He had a congregation about him. They all were taken to the concentration camp together. And he starts out giving a series of sermons which begin with him blaming the victims. With him saying, it's our fault, not it's your fault, it's our fault that this has come upon us. We weren't true enough to the mitzvot, and therefore God is punishing us. And then he reaches a moment where he says, it's too horrible. This could not be our fault. God could not do this. And then he stops holding services. He simply says, we don't have the energy. This is not what we should be doing. There's no way to deal with this tragedy religiously. In 20th century, late 20th century United States, there is an Orthodox rabbi whose name is Irving Greenberg. He's affectionately known by his followers as Rabbi Yitz Greenberg. Everybody calls him Yitz. Yitz, who is an Oxford PhD, has stated that we are living in what is called the third millennia. That we are living in an entirely new epoch in Jewish history, never experienced before. That what has happened because of the Holocaust is that anyone who chooses to be Jewish or chooses to believe in God does so on a purely voluntary basis. There's never been a voluntary Jewish community in the history of the world until today, and only in the United States. I would suggest that if we don't deal with it, there will be no Judaism in 2,000 years. There may not anyway. But the reality is that this is such a cataclysmic event we have to understand that in some ways that argument is correct. In some ways I feel it is not. It is correct because no group of Jews since the exile from Israel in the year 70, with the destruction of the temple, has ever experienced what our generation has experienced. I mean, think about it. They lost the temple, which was their way to pray to God. They lost their connection to God. They lost their country. And they suffered a horrible defeat. Our people, in the last 40, 50 years, has gone through the Holocaust. Well, more than 50 years now. In the last 70 years, has gone through the Holocaust and the birth of Israel. And within the 200-year period preceding now, we've gone through the Enlightenment. I'm going to suggest to you that it all comes together with that notion of the Enlightenment and the fact that suddenly people have this concept that they are individuals. Never before in the history of the world were people individuals. They were part of a community. The Romani, whom we used to call gypsies, and I hope everybody understands that that's where we get the expression to gyp somebody. It's not a nice term in a politically correct world. The Romani, when invited to join the Holocaust program out in Portland, Oregon, where I had the privilege of serving as a rabbi, the Romani refused to let us have the names of Romani who died in the Holocaust to be placed upon the wall. We built a memorial wall, among other things. And we put up the names of all the Jews whom we could find and all the people who died in the Holocaust on that wall. So we reached out to the Romani community to say, wouldn't you like to have the names up there? And they said no. That in their tradition, when someone dies, they become part of the amorphous whole. And their individuality is lost. And for us, I would suggest, as 21st century American Jews, that's a breathtaking concept. Because we focus upon being ourselves. The great Far Side cartoon of all the penguins going down to the water, and one penguin is jumping up and yelling, "I gotta be me." I mean, it's a classic. Now, add that to the fact that we are a totally voluntary community, unlike any previous community, and you have free individuals trying to figure out what it means to be Jewish, which was where we began. So here's a possibility, and this is what we're going to play with today. Dr. Alvin Reines, who was the professor of Jewish philosophy at the Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati when I was a student, and who unfortunately now is deceased. Dr. Reines said that religion is the individual's authentic response to their state of being finite. I repeat, religion is the individual's authentic response, bracket S, responses, to the state of being finite. Explanation. All of us are finite. We're all going to die. While you could put enough monkeys perhaps in a room that they could create with typewriters or computers today, Shakespeare, we don't have an infinite number of anything to do anything like that. Everything has a finite limitation. And all of us are attempting to deal with the fact of our finitude. God. There is no mention of God. It has totally changed the equation. God becomes but one possible answer to how you deal with the fact that you are finite. This definition does not preclude the belief in God. It does not say there is no God. It simply says That's not the only way to get from point A to point B.